Welcome to the Mentally Whole podcast. I am your host, Lauren Green. This podcast is a safe place for us to have weekly discussions about mental health, Christ, personal development, and the tools to live our best lives. Please stay tuned for a new episode. Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of the Mentally Whole podcast. I am your host, Lauren Green. I hope you guys are having a great week because I am. So I'm sorry y'all, this episode is late, but this past weekend was pretty hectic for me and I really was trying to figure out what I was going to talk about today, and I really couldn't figure it out to save my life. But we're just going to jump right into the episode. You know the housekeeping announcements already. Subscribe, share, rate the podcast, and complete the listener survey. But for today's episode, we are learning from our uncle. Everybody's uncle, Uncle Snoop. Okay. Snoop Dogg recently sat down at the Red Table Talk with Jada Pinkett Smith, her mother Adrienne, and Willow to discuss his recent comments about Gayle King, as well as his apology that he made to Gayle King. I'm going to leave the link to the video in the show notes. It's about 30 minutes or so. So if you have a good chunk of time where you're not doing anything, you should probably watch it. I respect Uncle Snoop a lot. I love Snoop Dogg. He is a OG in the game. He is someone who's been through a lot of death and grief. If you haven't noticed, he lost Tupac. He lost Nipsey Hussle. He also lost a grandson recently and his grandmother. This guy has been through a lot of heartache, right? So the first lesson that I learned from Uncle Snoop from this interview is that we cannot let our emotions get the best of me, right? He, at the time he made, the Gayle King comment, he said it was a lot of things happening in his life, grieving Nipsey Hussle, still grieving Nipsey Hussle's death. It hasn't even been a year yet, from the loss of his grandson, the loss of his grandmother. He was dealing with a lot of things and his emotions got the best of him and he just kind of snapped on Gayle. And, sometimes in life we, allow our frustrations, our sadness, our disappointments get the best of us. And we just start snapping at regular people, you just be so mad. It's just whoever, gets on my nerves next is the one that's about to get it. Right. And they talked about another crucial thing is that in, the African American culture, Black men and Black women, we're not always taught, not all of us are taught this, but a lot of us are taught that we have to appear strong, right? And he made a good point, I'm strong for everybody else, but what about me? Right? What about me? What about when I want to cry or shed a tear or be upset? What about me? I have to be strong for everybody else. And what about me? So yeah, do not let your emotions get the best of you. Allow yourself time to grieve, allow yourself time to be frustrated, and allow yourself to process how you feel. However it is that you feel, give yourself time to process, right? Another point that was made, back to the whole, you have to be strong, point, Willow had mentioned generational post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Generational PTSD, and it makes so much sense. We just pass down all of these traumas. We pass down all of our hurts to our next generation, or we pass it down to our children, right? And we have to be able to say those behaviors, those actions stop with me. Yeah. So this episode will not be long, y'all. I promise you. Another point that Snoop Dogg said is that it doesn't bother me when you check me. Okay, that is another level of accountability, right? That's another level of accountability, because I think it's so important. He said that because a lot of times men and women, black, white, Puerto Rican, whoever, Hispanic, get so upset when someone checks them, right? He was saying when he made those comments about Gail, a lot of people were rooting for him, but they also say, yeah, man, I love what you said, but not that way. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't afraid to get checked by somebody, right? He wasn't afraid for someone to tell him the truth about what he said, right? And evidently whoever was talking to him, like, you need to say it in a different way, was very, they said it in a very helpful way, right? So don't be afraid to get checked and be held accountable for what you say and what you do out here in these streets. Also, my last point for this is that he said he understands when he is wrong. And I think this is important because a lot of times you just out here like, I'm right, I'm this and I'm that. And a lot of times you are not right. So it is important for us to understand when we are wrong. This is like another level of awareness, right? It's important to be aware of ourselves, our emotions, our actions, and our behaviors. Because once we are truly aware of all these things, we can quickly identify when we are wrong, right? That's my second to last point. Yeah. Understand that when you are wrong, it takes another level of awareness, it takes another level of self-reflection, right? It takes another level of introspection to be like, hey, I'm wrong, right? I'm wrong, right? So we discussed, what did we discuss? We discussed in this episode what we learned from a good old Uncle Snoop. We talked about allowing ourselves time to process our feelings, generational PTSD. That might be another episode because I kind of like that topic a lot. Not being afraid to get checked and understanding when we are wrong. So I hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you guys next week.